Elvis Presley was known for his larger-than-life personality, his magnetic stage presence, and his love for adventure. But one night at Graceland, things took a wild turn that even Elvis couldn't have predicted. It was supposed to be a simple lesson, just Elvis teaching his beloved Priscilla how to shoot a gun. But as the evening unfolded, what started out as a casual bit of fun soon spiraled into chaos, leaving everyone scrambling for cover in a scene that could rival any Hollywood movie. Imagine the flash of gunfire, startled screams, and a frantic rush as Priscilla, caught up in a moment of panic, unleashed a storm of stray bullets. The night was filled with more excitement than anyone bargained for, and it's one of those unforgettable stories that proves life at Graceland was never boring. Visuals of Elvis in his signature look, Priscilla looking unsure, and sound effects of gunshots and a stampeding crowd will instantly pull viewers into the middle of this unbelievable night of bedlam at the Presley estate. Number 6. Setting the scene. Graceland was more than just a mansion. It was the epicenter of Elvis Presley's life, a place that became as iconic as the king of rock and roll himself. Nestled in Memphis, Tennessee, this grand estate was where Elvis found solace from the demands of fame, a sprawling home where he could embrace his love for adventure and indulge in his many hobbies. Among these pastimes was Elvis's fascination with firearms, a passion that grew stronger over the years. Elvis was known to collect guns, treating them almost as an extension of his persona, powerful, bold, and not to be taken lightly. His love for firearms wasn't just about protection, it was also about excitement, control, and embracing the thrill of holding something dangerous, yet exhilarating. Behind Graceland, away from the public eye, Elvis and his entourage had a makeshift shooting range. This hidden spot was his private arena, where he could practice shooting without the constraints of a firing range or the prying eyes of the media. It was here, on an ordinary evening, that Elvis decided it was time for Priscilla to learn how to shoot. He wanted to share this part of his world with her, to bring her closer to the experiences that thrilled him. The shooting range was rudimentary, just a secluded space at the back of the estate, but to Elvis, it was perfect. It was a place where he could teach, entertain, and push the boundaries, all while surrounded by friends and his beloved Priscilla. Elvis was nothing if not insistent, and when he had an idea in his head, it had to be done immediately, no questions asked. This was certainly the case with teaching Priscilla how to handle firearms. Elvis believed in being prepared for anything, and to him, that meant everyone around him, including Priscilla, needed to be comfortable with a gun. He loved the idea of her being as confident with a weapon as he was. Priscilla, however, wasn't as enthusiastic, but her hesitation didn't matter much to Elvis. When Elvis set his mind to something, it was happening, right then and there. So, surrounded by curious onlookers, Elvis handed Priscilla her first firearm, determined that she would learn to shoot, regardless of her uncertainty. What followed was anything but a smooth lesson. It was the beginning of an unforgettable night that would have everyone running for cover. Number 5. The lesson begins. Among those present that fateful evening was Nancy Rooks, Graceland's trusted maid, who would go on to share the unforgettable story in her memoir, Inside Graceland, Elvis's Maid Remembers. Nancy wasn't just a staff member, she was a witness to the daily happenings at Graceland, someone who had a front-row seat to the chaotic, exhilarating, and sometimes downright bizarre world of Elvis Presley. When Elvis decided it was time for Priscilla to learn how to shoot, Nancy, along with several others, gathered outside to see how it would all unfold. She may not have realized it at the time, but that night would become one of the most memorable stories she'd carry with her from her years at Graceland. Her recounting of the night brings vivid details to life, allowing us to feel the excitement, tension, and inevitable chaos that followed. As Elvis prepared to give Priscilla her first shooting lesson, it quickly became a spectacle. The shooting range in the back of Graceland wasn't just a place for target practice, it had become a stage, with Elvis and Priscilla in the spotlight. The group of onlookers consisted of Elvis's closest friends and staff, all eager to see how this impromptu lesson would play out. Vintage photos show Elvis with his signature grin, his arm around Priscilla, while she appeared slightly uneasy. The gathering that night was casual, but there was an undercurrent of excitement in the air. Priscilla, always the supportive partner, was ready to give it her best shot, literally. With Elvis by her side and the entire group watching with anticipation, it was clear that this was no ordinary evening at Graceland. Priscilla's nervousness was palpable as Elvis handed her the firearm. This wasn't just any gun. It was a long-barreled .45, and the weight of it caught her off guard. Priscilla had never handled anything quite like it, and the sheer heaviness of the gun made her fingers slip, almost causing her to drop it. The crowd watched with bated breath, a mix of curiosity and concern washing over them. This was her first challenge. Simply holding the weapon felt overwhelming. Elvis, ever the supportive yet insistent teacher, tried to reassure her, but it was clear that Priscilla was struggling. Her eyes were wide, her hands unsteady, and it seemed as though everyone in the crowd instinctively took a step back, sensing that things might go south very quickly. The tension built as she aimed at the target, trying to control the unfamiliar weight, not knowing that what was about to happen next would send everyone scattering for safety. Number 4. Chaos Unleashed. When Elvis handed Priscilla the long-barreled .45, it was immediately clear that she was in over her head. The gun was heavy, its cold steel unfamiliar in her hands, and she almost dropped it as the weight pulled her down. Her arms wavered under the pressure, her fingers unsure of where to grip. It wasn't just the heft of the weapon that made her uneasy. It was the realization that she was handling something powerful, something that, with one wrong move, could cause real damage. The audience of friends and staff watched intently, some of them stifling chuckles at her obvious discomfort, while others eyed the scene with increasing concern. Elvis, seeing her struggle, didn't let her give up. Instead, he reached out, taking the .45 from her hands with a comforting smile, before replacing it with something smaller and more manageable. It was a gesture of encouragement, one that he hoped would put her more at ease. Priscilla's nerves were still apparent as she gripped the smaller firearm, but she knew she couldn't back down now. With Elvis guiding her, she raised the gun, aimed shakily at the target, and pulled the trigger. The first shot rang out, missing the target by a good 3 feet. It was nowhere near where she had intended it to go, and the sound echoed across the backyard, startling her even more. The onlookers shifted uneasily, and a few exchanged nervous glances, wondering if this was really such a good idea after all. Priscilla bit her lip, her face flushing slightly from embarrassment. She had wanted to impress Elvis, to show him that she could handle this, but the initial attempt had gone worse than she expected. Elvis, however, didn't seem deterred. He stood close by, his voice soft with encouragement, urging her to try again. But something changed in that moment. Whether it was the jolt of the gun's recoil or the pressure of all eyes on her, Priscilla suddenly panicked. Instead of taking a deep breath and resetting her aim, her fear took over. She squeezed the trigger again, and again, and again, in rapid succession. The shots went wild, spraying the bricks around the makeshift target. Shards of brick and dust flew through the air, and the crowd's casual curiosity turned into outright alarm. People began to duck and scatter, their laughter turning into shouts as they tried to get out of the line of fire. The scene descended into chaos. Nancy Rooks later described it as a mass stampede, everyone running in different directions, some diving for cover, others yelling for Priscilla to stop. Elvis lunged forward, trying to calm her, but in her panic, Priscilla was almost oblivious to everything around her. The once relaxed gathering had erupted into utter mayhem, the quiet evening shattered by the sound of gunshots and frantic shouts. This part of the story is where visuals and sound effects would truly come to life. Imagine the flashes of the gun firing, the sound of bullets ricocheting off bricks, and the gasps and screams of the startled crowd. Vintage footage of Elvis laughing and Priscilla looking overwhelmed would serve as the perfect backdrop, while sound effects of gunfire and shouts would convey the pandemonium of that moment. The imagery of people diving behind whatever cover they could find, scrambling towards the safety of the house, and Elvis trying to bring the situation under control, all paint a vivid picture of the chaos that ensued. It was a night that none of them would soon forget. A simple shooting lesson turned into an unforgettable scene of panic and confusion, with Priscilla at the center, trying desperately to regain control. Number 3. The aftermath. In the midst of the frenzy, it was Elvis who finally stepped in to bring the situation under control. With his characteristic blend of calm authority and swift action, Elvis lunged forward and grabbed Priscilla's hand, firmly taking the gun from her grasp. The panic in Priscilla's eyes softened as soon as she felt Elvis's reassuring presence by her side. He spoke to her in a gentle tone, assuring her that it was okay, and just like that, the tension in the air began to dissipate. The wild, chaotic energy of the scene slowly settled as everyone realized the immediate danger had passed. Elvis's decisive move put an end to the chaos, and with the gun safely in his hands, the group could finally breathe again. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, an almost eerie stillness as everyone looked around, checking themselves and each other. Dust hung in the air from the bits of brick that had been blown off the wall, and for that brief second, it was as if no one knew quite what to say. And then, as if on cue, laughter broke out, first from a few members of the crowd, and then spreading until everyone was either chuckling or letting out a sigh of relief. There was an almost absurd humor to it all. Despite the chaos, no one had been hurt, and somehow that made the entire episode comical in retrospect. The onlookers began to applaud, cheering not only Priscilla's attempt, but also their collective survival of the unexpected mayhem. Even Priscilla managed a sheepish smile, her face flushed, but her eyes meeting Elvis's with a mix of embarrassment and affection. Elvis, ever the showman, gave an exaggerated bow, prompting more laughter from the relieved crowd. To truly capture the aftermath of that wild evening, vintage footage or photographs of the well house at Graceland could serve as a perfect illustration. The well house had borne the brunt of Priscilla's panicked shooting spree, with bullet holes and chipped bricks still visible long after the chaos ended. The damage was a testament to that memorable night, a physical reminder of the time Elvis decided to teach Priscilla to shoot, and it all went hilariously awry. The camera could linger on these details, showing the chunks of brick that had been blasted off and the spots that had been hastily patched over. It's these small remnants, left behind in the wake of that unforgettable lesson, that would forever mark the night as part of Graceland's unique and colorful history. Number 2. Priscilla's later experience with guns. Despite the chaotic first attempt, Priscilla was not someone who gave up easily. In time, she did eventually learn how to handle a gun, though her journey was certainly not without its fair share of hiccups. Elvis, ever the determined teacher, continued to work with her, and Priscilla showed persistence, even if her early experiences were fraught with mishaps. The makeshift shooting range at the back of Graceland became her training ground. Under Elvis's guidance, and with the occasional helpful but humorous coaching from members of the entourage, Priscilla gradually began to get the hang of it. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but rather a steady improvement, and soon she could hold her own, at least enough to fire off a shot without sending the entire household running for cover. One of the more memorable anecdotes from these shooting lessons came from Nancy Rooks, who often witnessed the amusing dynamic between Priscilla and Elvis's trusted bodyguard, Red West. Red, a close friend of Elvis and a member of his inner circle, took on the role of Priscilla's coach when it came to fine-tuning her aim. Nancy recalled the sight of Priscilla standing with her gun, her brows furrowed in concentration, while Red stood behind her, barking out instructions like a drill sergeant. 10 feet to the right!" he'd yell, his voice carrying across the yard as Priscilla adjusted her stance and tried again. The well house was often the unfortunate target, enduring Priscilla's misplaced shots, and over time, the building's exterior bore witness to her progress, or lack thereof. Those who knew Elvis and Priscilla could always count on Red to add a bit of humor to the otherwise serious task of learning how to shoot. In fact, for those who visit Graceland today, the remnants of Priscilla's shooting lessons are still there, a testament to those long-ago nights filled with laughter, chaos, and determination. The bullet holes and chipped bricks in the well house haven't completely disappeared. They've been painted over, but if you know where to look, you can still see the evidence. Tour guides often point it out as one of the fun, quirky facts about Graceland, a reminder of the times when the king of rock and roll decided that teaching his loved ones how to shoot was just another way to spend an evening. It's these kinds of stories that bring Graceland to life for visitors today, showing that beneath the grandeur and fame, it was also a place where real, often humorous moments played out, moments that made Elvis and Priscilla more relatable, more human, and all the more legendary. Number 1. Priscilla's concerns about Elvis and guns. As Priscilla gradually became more familiar with handling a gun, her comfort with firearms never quite matched Elvis's enthusiasm. In fact, as their relationship progressed, she grew increasingly concerned about Elvis's fascination with guns, which seemed to evolve from a casual interest to a full-blown obsession. What had once been a playful, exciting pastime was becoming something much darker. Elvis's love of firearms wasn't just about collecting or practicing for fun. It was tied to a growing sense of paranoia that began to overshadow his later years. For Priscilla, it was hard to watch the man she loved become consumed by fears, both real and imagined, and she couldn't ignore the role that guns played in this transformation. The Elvis who had laughed and joked while teaching her to shoot was now using guns as a way to cope with the anxieties that plagued him. In her memoir, Elvis and Me, Priscilla offered an honest account of how this obsession with firearms began to shape Elvis's life. In the absence of any significant professional challenge, Elvis created his own real-life dramas, she wrote, reflecting on the challenging period in their relationship. She described how his fascination with guns had transformed into something troubling, an obsession driven by his growing paranoia about death threats and a sense of needing to protect himself. He even began to take on a vigilante-like attitude, believing it was his duty to take dangerous people off the streets. It wasn't just about owning guns anymore. It was about constantly having them nearby, ready for use. And this was something that deeply worried Priscilla. She loved Elvis, but she knew that his obsession with firearms was spiraling out of control, and it made her fearful for both his safety and the safety of those around him. There were many infamous incidents that underscored Elvis's unpredictable relationship with his guns, moments that Priscilla found both alarming and heartbreaking. He was known to shoot at household objects in fits of frustration or to make a point, turning his beloved Graceland into an unintentional shooting gallery. There was the time he fired bullets into a television set when it displeased him, shattering the screen in an explosion of glass and sparks. On another occasion, in a particularly bizarre episode, Elvis shot his toilet, leaving his fiancée, Ginger Alden, startled as she lay nearby. These incidents weren't just about anger or showmanship. They were an expression of the turmoil he carried within him. Archival images of Elvis posing with firearms, his signature smile masking the deeper struggles, serve as a stark reminder of this juxtaposition. The king of rock and roll, armed and in control on the surface, was battling a world of fears beneath, and for Priscilla, witnessing this unraveling was as heartbreaking as it was frightening. This wild night at Graceland is just one of many larger-than-life stories that capture the unique and often unpredictable world of Elvis and Priscilla Presley. From makeshift shooting lessons that turned into chaotic adventures to moments of glamour, heartbreak, and laughter, Their life together was filled with unforgettable experiences that still fascinate us today. But we want to hear from you. What do you think Priscilla must have felt that night, standing there with all eyes on her and chaos erupting around her? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, you won't want to miss what's coming next. More surprising tales from Graceland that reveal the behind-the-scenes moments of Elvis's life that few have heard before. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another fascinating dive into the world of the King of Rock and Roll. There's always more to uncover, and we can't wait to take you along for the ride.